Right. This might well be an Easter egg at the end of the audio version of this. And if I put this out on video, this will be a prologue to the conversation. But do you remember I said, I've been waiting to open this sucker. So
Okay.
here, as long as I've got the right envelope, is this one from Telos? Yeah. I've
What's in
got
the package, JR?
I've got so many unopened packages. I've got this one.
You're like Father Christmas.
Do you want to see what's in this one?
No. Yes, I do, actually. Yeah. What is it?
I've made you curious now. I've just also got the Blake 7 box set of
Mine's been delayed.
has it?
Yeah, I was expecting it to be here when I got back tonight, and it said,
That's not very kind of them.
yeah. Well, there we go. It is what it is. I don't really like Plex 7 that much, so I'm only going
Neither
to
do
watch the
I.
extras. But I can't
Well,
not buy it.
this is why I've put Blake 7 in the randomizer
Mm.
to
If
try and
anybody if
make me
anybody's
watch it.
if anybody's only listening to this, JR's wielding a knife and a massive box now, and a pair of scissors.
Yeah, the knife wasn't doing it for me, so I'm doing the scissors now. Because it's all a bit just too heavily taped together on here. I hope Andrew Cartmell's watching this. That's all I can say.
Well, it must be Cartmel stuff. I've got a package here, but I've got nothing to open it with.
Oh, what? I mean, get yourself a pair of hands, Dylan.
Yeah, well, yeah, true.
Honestly, this is not.
This is well taped. This is fun. This is like Christmas morning, isn't it? Oh, it's all the Ben Aronovich books, Rivers of London.
It's the complete set of the first six books. I think after that, they go into kind of spin-offs and slightly odd, but this is the first six novels. I bought that for myself as a treat about a year ago, and I've been waiting for an excuse to open it ever since. Have
Wow.
you nearly done with yours? This
No,
is
this.
my best unboxing video ever.
Oh, can't get into it. Right, hang on. I'm in.
Although I've got too many clothes on if this is an unboxing video, haven't I?
Oh my God.
The Blake 7 one can wait. That's no fun.
You see, I told you I needed scissors.
I don't know. Hands are usually good.
No, this is an eBay package that's been wrapped up.
Oh, okay.
Thank.
Sometimes with the eBay packages, they go what you might describe as just a touch too far.
Yeah.
Do you want to
No,
just tell me what it is?
I'm in.
Oh!
It's
Oh
one
my God.
wonderful.
Dylan's not only opened it, he's ruined it.
It's the official Doctor Who annual 2012 for
Oh,
reasons.
wow. What can I say?
For reasons that you're probably well aware of, JR.
I'm well aware of, but you've just given something away here.
Well, let's see. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that. What's in the other box? This should be easy to open. Look at that. A
Oh,
quality product that is packaged in a quality way.
you say it's a quality product. The proof is about to be in the pudding. Oh,
Look at that. It's
Doctor Who, Myths and Legends, the real-time pictures story. Dylan Reese.
that's a bit of a mouthful of a title.
I've had bigger mouthfuls, let me put it that way.
Who are you, Joe Ford?
I, yeah, no. Right, here we go. But the most important thing for me is here we go. Does it sit comfortably on the shelf alongside? It does!
It does. Look at
It's
that.
exactly the same dimensions as Downtime, the lost years of Doctor Who. Almost. There's like a fraction of millimeters in it. Unbelievable. Well,
Wow,
I'm
look at
very
that.
impressed.
Well, everybody can go home now, can't they?
The ones who are watching it can. Although,
The
so,
shiny, shiny book.
oh, I say it's a children's edition with pictures in.
Yeah, I did all the illustrations myself.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, this is going to be. Oh, and there's a color picture section.
Oh, yeah. All the mod cons. Although
Uh,
the first printing, I believe, is now sold out, so it'll be black and white photos only from now on.
oh dear.
Sorry to
So,
disappoint.
so it says David J. Howe was on hand in the studio and can remember that just came out in huge chunks. Now, I've started the sentence halfway down one page and finished it at the top of the next page. So that's not really how that sentence went, is it?
No, no, I can't remember that particular sentence.
I'm very disappointed in the fact that there's writing in here. It would have been so much better if it'd just been the pictures.
Wouldn't it? It'd be so
Just
much easier as well.
just remember that for next time. You only need the pictures. I'm going to look at the page count now. If it doesn't end on an even numbered page, I'm going to be unhappy. 328. Look at that.
Wow.
Dylan, classic.
A classic.
Yes.
328, it's a good number, unlucky for some.
You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next half an hour, we are going to be talking about the myth makers, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
Hi, I'm Dylan.
So now we're into it. Dylan, you've just written a book,
I have just written a book.
and you've been talking about it on lots of podcasts, so let's forget all about the book. Well,
Well,
let's
it's
talk
been a
about the.
while now. It's been a while.
Well, maybe because we were going to do this months ago, and we just
Yeah.
never really
Life
quite.
life got in the way.
But also now we're in November, so we're heading towards Christmas. So this book is going to be in people's Christmas stockings.
Yes, absolutely. It's the perfect stocking filler
I mean,
for
knowing Doctor Who fans, they'll be buying it to give to themselves.
yeah, absolutely.
And what more perfect a present could they possibly want?
Yeah.
But I think we should get to the book chronologically. We need to
Okay.
start. Actually, who's going to start this? That's a curious question. Do you remember the first myth makers coming out?
I don't remember the first Myth Makers coming out because I was 1 year old when they started
Wow,
in 1984. But
I do.
do you?
Yes. So this is where we're going to have some back and forth in this conversation.
Right. Okay. Tell us,
So,
JR.
well,
What was
only in
1984 like?
well, yeah, but I mean, it was the 1980s, and I was what 15 or something, I think, when
Yeah.
the first one came out. So I was buying records. So any spare cash I had would be going on records, or the very early Doctor Who VHS releases. So I remember seeing this advertised, I think, in Doctor Who magazine or talked about in Doctor Who magazine.
Yeah.
I certainly remember it. So I think it must have been in Doctor Who magazine, wasn't it? I think so.
Yes, there were adverts and mentions in DWM and Celestial Toy Room and things like that.
Right. So I
And
do remember.
DWB.
Yeah. Oh, well, I didn't get any DWBs till a bit later because they weren't very easy to find where I was. Point being, I didn't buy any of these at the time because, they were probably about a tenner, which is about 50 quid in today's money, probably.
Yeah.
And so that was quite steep. So if you weren't getting actual episodes of Doctor Who for your money, I was the wrong age, really, at the time.
No, absolutely. It's a niche product even then.
Well, yes. But we'll come back to it because it didn't stay a niche product. And at one point, I was very heavily into this. So we'll come back to that. So do you remember when you first became aware of such a thing as the myth makers?
Yeah, so a weird thing happened.
Is this covered in the book?
Some of it, not the first bit I'm going to tell you.
Oh,
Uh,
exclusive.
so
Unless you've talked about it on another podcast.
I might have done. I don't know, JR. As you realise, when you've watched lots of myth makers and been to conventions, people repeat the same stuff and can't remember any of it.
But also, what they do is, there you go, I've got my knife out again. What
JR
they
just
do is
pointed a penknife at me.
they embellish and make it funnier. So they
Well,
take all the
quite.
truth out of it, but add in a load of comedy to make up for it.
I'm only going to give you the truth. No humour whatsoever.
I've
Uh,
noticed this.
in about 1991, 92, my dad worked for an advertising agency. And somebody said to my dad, "You should take this video of this company. They do corporate videos. Um, and they also do these weird Doctor Who things." And he went, "Oh, my son likes Doctor Who." I don't know whether this was Keith Barmfather or somebody had Keith had given a video to somebody, had given a video to my dad. Maybe Keith and my dad met in the past. Who knows?
Wow.
And that video was Just Who on Earth is Tom Baker, which is not a Mythmakers, but it's of a similar ilk. It was a documentary made after Tom Baker's Mythmaker, featuring well, it was directed by his wife and written by Tom Baker, and it's basically a video of Tom interviewing himself and being irreverent and amusing and all these other things.
And he did that for real time.
Yes, he
Yeah.
approached them and he said, I've got an idea for another production. Would you be interested in
Oh,
it?
because he'd already done his
Yeah,
Mythmakers interview and now he wanted to do something.
yeah. And
Right.
he obviously saw, you know, it's not the sort of thing that a TV channel was going to commission, but he obviously saw something in Keith that went, he can do this, and you know, it'll find an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that makes perfect sense. So you got this VHS. Did
Yeah.
that put you on to more, or was that just like a one-off thing?
No, it definitely put me onto more, and I started seeing them advertised in the magazine and stuff. And I was buying a lot of back issues of the magazine, so you know, as with collecting Doctor Who pre the internet, it was all out of order, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And one day I was at a convention and I picked up two conventions, probably about a year apart, to be honest. I picked up Victor Pemberton's Mythmakers, which probably isn't the obvious one for like an 11-year-old kid to pick up, and another one was another real-time release called the Panopticon Tapes 5, which was a panel from a Panopticon all about the making of the story Dragonfire. And it was probably done 6 or 7 months after uh, Dragonfire was broadcast.
Oh, yeah.
So it's as
So
good as you've got in terms of a sort of contemporaneous making of than you're going to get. So you know everything's still fresh in everybody's mind. The show's still on the air, and
plus
so
being a
it's
convention panel, there's that little bit less promotion and that little bit
yeah,
more honesty probably
yeah.
about what's going on.
Absolutely. And then from there, I used to pick them up whenever I could. As you said, they were quite expensive. Even in the 90s, they were sort of the re-release tapes were sort of 16 quid a pop.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So you had to be,
you
you
had
had
to
to be
be,
enthusiastic about this.
which I was.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've always collected them. And I was a fan of the dramas as well. I remember when Downtime was released, you know, I was at the premiere, such as it was, of Downtime. And
That was no, it wasn't a
that,
convention,
no,
was it?
that
It
was
was
a
an
convention.
event.
Well, there were two. There was one
Right,
I went to the one at the convention at Panopticon 95, and there was another one um, like at Riverside Studios or the BFI or something like that, which was a bit more official, which I didn't go to.
right. And you should have, and you've
No.
regretted ever since,
Yeah,
obviously.
exactly.
And then, so these releases started to become more regular. Were they regular right from the start, or were they a bit intermittent at the start? I seem to think at the start they were a little bit more intermittent, but
They're a little intermittent. They're sort of a couple a year, and they sort of picked up speed in the early to mid 90s, where they sort of. I don't think you could ever put your hand on your heart and say the range was monthly, but as good as at points.
yeah, yeah.
It depended how busy Keith was with other stuff as well. So
Well, the range did go monthly, didn't it, in the 2000s? So I've just looked this up because I didn't know up until a few minutes ago when this happened. But so by the time you get to, so in the 90s, I kind of fell out of love with Doctor Who, stopped buying the magazine and stuff, and kind of lost interest, although I kept my videos. I always kept the videos and would occasionally watch. And then around about 2000, I got back into it again and started buying the magazine again and started picking up more interest. I guess this coincides with the DVDs. And then in 2003, according to this, so I had noticed, or I was aware of by this point, all these myth makers, and I think a friend had lent me a couple on VHS. And I was like, oh my God, but there's like 100 of them. I'm
right,
never going to pick these all up. And then in 2003, Keith starts releasing them in pairs on
yeah,
DVD, and you could subscribe. So it did go monthly because once a month for your £9.99 plus £2 postage or whatever it was subscription, you get a lovely shiny disc
yeah.
with two interviews on it popping through your letterbox. And I did subscribe, and I stayed subscribed. I'm not still subscribed to this day, obviously.
Well, I think the double releases stopped at some point. It was around the, but it was when they relaunched the website.
I think
So
that's about when I stopped. Yeah.
yeah, no, that makes sense. So I think this it was sort of the first 50, 60 that ended up being released that way. Not all of them, but
I've
it
got
was a good way
about,
to collect them.
yeah, yeah, I've certainly got about 40 or 50 discs because I've got a lot of the single interview ones as well that
Mm,
came out during that period. So yeah, and so here's how I feel about them. They're not the most professional of products. Like they're not the kind of thing that you would see on BBC Two of an evening or whatever. You wouldn't. I don't think there's many of these, if any of these, that you would broadcast, say, on BBC Four or whatever. If you had
Yeah,
another Doctor Who celebration now, I guess. I mean, but that is not me being disingenuous towards what Keith's doing.
yeah,
What Keith's doing is absolutely fine for VHS releases,
yeah.
but you
I
know what I
mean,
mean.
I
But
think in especially in the late 80s and early 90s, it was broadcast quality material, but it was
mm,
like in terms of the equipment, but it was the
yes,
sort of stuff you'd shoot news interviews on and stuff like that. It's not, it's not necessarily uh, an episode of a panorama or a high-end documentary or something like that because it's what's available to them. It's before the digital
well,
revolution.
exactly. Oh yeah, no. When I said the quality is not up to broadcast standards, I don't mean the quality of the production. I
Mm.
meant the quality of the product, as
Yeah.
in you've got sort of a 40-minute interview with somebody who's in Doctor Who that's basically just them sitting in their living room for 40 minutes. You wouldn't broadcast that on BBC Two, is kind
It's
of what I'm saying.
unlikely.
Yeah. But I think as a fan of something, that is invaluable because, if you pick up, say, the DVD or the Blu-ray of Terror of the Zygons, you're going to get documentary, which is cut together bits of interviews
Hmm.
of all sorts of different people. But what you're learning about is the story and the production. But what you're not really learning about is the people who made it. And, you know, as good as some of those documentaries are, and they do specific ones for the people now, obviously on the Blu-ray collection, the Mythmakers collection has got what 100, different interviews with.
Approaching 200.
Is it now? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. With all these people who are never, for any other thing that they've ever done in their careers, going to have something like this where they sit down and it's just an hour of that person talking to an interviewer in their living room. I think it's a fantastic resource, frankly.
No, and I think that's the big thing. It is this huge archive that tells the whole history of classic Doctor Who, and arguably the
Mm.
history of sort of television in the 20th century, albeit through the prism of Doctor Who. And it's getting these people in an like you say, especially when they're at home. It's a lot more of a relaxed environment. It's not on a stage. It's not like Matthew Sweet gets amazing interviews now, but that's still very much you come to a studio, you're picked up by a car, and you
Yeah,
do,
yeah, yeah.
there's an element of he gets huge amounts of honesty, but there's still an element of performance there. And again, the story's being embellished over time.
Yeah, quite. Because sitting at home, and this is the great genius of them, is that when once they decide that you've got to have Nicholas Briggs doing these interviews, and for the most part he does for more than 10 years, doesn't he? Pretty much every
Yeah,
single one.
yeah. I mean, there's a thing where essentially he can't always be there, so they
Yeah,
start
yeah.
cutting away to him and he's not there, which works for some but works less well for
Right, right.
others, unfortunately. But everybody was aware of that, and it couldn't go on forever. So
But the thing is, he or whoever's standing in for him in some of those early ones, once he sort of learns what he's doing because when he first starts this, he's not a professional interviewer or anything like that. Once he's kind of got used to what he's doing and how he's doing it, he manages to get stuff out of these interviewees that you'd never get on stage in a convention.
no, absolutely. I think again, it's about the environment. It's not just about the environment, but it is about Briggs has people have warmed to Briggs maybe through conventions, through these productions, and showing up and seeing it's a professional outfit and not just some fans with a
But they've
camcorder.
also talked to each other at
Yeah,
conventions and said,
yeah,
you should do this thing with Nick Briggs, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think never underestimate what a fantastic interviewer Nick Briggs is, because he really does hone his craft, especially over the first couple of interviews he does. And by the time you get to say the Colin Baker one, Colin's talking about some very, very personal stuff. Like he's talking about the death of his child, and losing the role of Doctor Who, and probably I can't put my hand on the heart and say, but probably for the first time, at least in a visual medium,
Yeah.
I've not seen him talk about it before.
Yeah, and probably being that this is that much closer to it as well, he's probably talking
Yeah,
about it in much more raw of a way than
yeah,
afterwards when he kind of as you say, by the time they come to conventions in the 2000s or whatever,
Mm.
they've kind of honed the stories they're telling.
But even you look at, like, obviously they don't do many new series people, but Christopher Eccleston didn't say what happened on Doctor Who for years. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's only over maybe the last
But
five
he
years or
still
so.
hasn't really, has
No,
he?
no, no. But like he's let more out over the last 5 years or so. So it's interesting that, so, and both Colin and and Christopher Eccleston both would fully have had the rights, considering what's happened to them, to walk away from it and never talk about it again.
Absolutely. Right. You and I ostensibly said this podcast was going to be a review of two of these releases. I knew it wasn't going to be. But
No.
nevertheless, we both watched these two. And I think, I mean, we won't talk about them that much, but we will talk about them
Mm.
because I think also they're an interesting comparison about where the range stood at the times they were recorded. And they're both ones that came up a lot during the course of your promotional work, most of which I listened to and thought, yeah, why is he not saying that to me? Even when you were doing it on your own podcast, I thought that was outrageously rude.
I do apologize. Well, I've tried not to say the same things to you as I've said to other people. So this is
Yeah.
the final and definitive interview on Doctor Who, the interviews. I,
Yeah,
yeah.
until on Too Hot for TV, somebody chooses the Dylan Reese interviews for when the Mythmakers book came out. That's what I'm gonna choose now that I've said it. So we chose to talk about the Ian Marter one, and we
Yes.
chose to talk about the Jack Pitt one.
They are two ones that I often cite as being key ones in the range. There are many others that we could talk about, but those are two that I think are worth having a bit of a chat about.
I think the Ian Marter one was the first one I ever saw.
Mm,
I think before they started releasing them on DVD, like I say, I'm pretty sure I borrowed a handful off a friend
mm,
because that's why I was like, oh yeah, it's worth me, investing my money in these.
yeah.
Otherwise, I might not have bothered, not knowing what they were. And I'm pretty sure that when he said, "Oh, I've got some," I would have said to him, "Have you got the Ian Marter one?" Because I would have been interested. Because not only was he my favorite companion,
Mm,
basically, but also he wrote novelizations of a lot of the
yeah.
stories, and I was curious about that too. Plus, I just think he's a fantastic actor, and the fact that he died so young meant that he didn't get to play a lot of the parts that he really should have. And I didn't
Yeah.
know anything about the film that he and Tom Baker nearly wrote at this
Mm.
point either, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, well, so Ian Marter dies in between filming this and it being released.
I didn't know this until I started to listen to
Mm.
you talking about it on these
Yeah.
interviews.
And David J. Howe, who directed this one, and it's after we talk about people being sat at home, this is very much not that. They're walking around the locations of the
Well, yeah.
Terror of the Zygons.
It's
Uh,
awful.
what? And David J. Howe gave me this stack of paperwork, which included like a letter from Ian going, "I can't wait to. I had a great day.
Wow.
Can't wait to see the finished thing." And unfortunately, he passed away. So it remains the most definitive interview with him I think we've got. There are
Yeah.
a couple of convention panels, one of which is released later on in the real time range, but it's talking about the Target books exclusively.
Right.
And there's a couple of lower quality convention panels that exist on sort of home video that we saw
Right.
a bit of in the recent collection box set, and then some imprint ones. But this is probably the most. I think it probably covers the most ground. Not everything. It's still only about 50 minutes long, but that was as much down to the length of the tape and things like that back in those days.
Well, the version I watched was the short version
Yeah,
too.
yeah, the 30 minuter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see. I think this is kind of. So I remember, was the first one they released on DVD the Mary Tam one, or
Oh,
it's the Alice in Wonderland one, whoever that was.
that was Mary Tam. I don't know whether it was the
Yeah,
first one on DVD, but
it was very early though, and I remember that being a real shock to the system, thinking, "Oh my God, what a wasted opportunity." Because clearly from the start, what it needs is for them to just sit down and talk. Because that's, see, I think they misunderstood this at the start, didn't they? They thought they needed it to be some kind of narrative, but actually, all people really wanted was for them to sit down and talk to the person.
Well, I think that, I mean, they've said themselves, Nick, David J. Howe, Keith Barnfather, they were all sort of frustrated filmmakers. They wanted to make drama, so that
Yeah.
was their way of getting to a little bit. But I have to say, I love those things, and as a kid especially, I like a little bit extra. Sort of excited me in that way, but it's not for everybody, and I'm absolutely fine with them wandering around being stalked by a Zygon for 50 minutes.
I don't mind, but it's just that every time that comes up, it's like almost it feels a little bit like they're having the conversations in order to fill in the space between the
Mm.
other stuff. And I just every time they stand up and say, "Oh, was that a rustling in the bushes?" I'm thinking, "No, stay seated, talk about the thing you're talking about, carry on talking." But of course, not to be. I
Um,
mean, but they don't last that way for terribly long, do they?
I mean, they still do the odd thing now and then, but no, sort of by the mid 90s, when real time start to own their own kit as well, it tends to become Keith and a couple of other people going somewhere to shoot an interview, whether they're wandering around a Doctor Who location at someone's house or just in a nice looking location.
What's your feelings about the Ian Marter one? And I know the importance of the interview, but how do you think it stands, objectively speaking, in the sort of pantheon of myth makers? It's
I
probably
think
not one of the, to be honest, for me, I don't think it's one of the best, but I do think it's one of the most fascinating.
I don't think they've quite got to the point where they really delve into someone's personal life. I think it's a lovely representation of what it was like to have a chat to this man and go through his resume, which we've got to remember back in the day, nobody knew what Ian Marter did, like unless you saw him do it. It wasn't like now where you go to his Wikipedia
Yeah,
article and
yeah,
you see, or his IMDb. So that's sort of fascinating enough. And it's also what fandom was interested in at the time. They were less interested in the more sort of outrageous stories because they hadn't really been told yet. And they were less interested in the personal lives. It was all like, what was it like working on this? What was it like working
yeah,
with
yeah.
this person? That sort of thing. Not to say it's a basic interview, it's just an interview of its time. I think I mentioned Colin Bacon. Colin Bacon?
Colin Bacon used to present Pooh Pooh Bleater, didn't didn't he? I'm sure he did.
Richard Bacon.
Okay.
But
No,
he
that was
hasn't.
Blue Peter. That wasn't Pooh Bleater.
um,
Blue
but
Peter's the story of a shit sheep.
I think I think they get a really good interview for the time about it. I think you get something a lot more personal now. As I said, by Colin Baker's time, it does get more personal, and throughout the range, there are some very intimate. Really, Ian Collier, who played Omega in Arc of Infinity, his story is fascinating and heartbreaking in ways. And Angela Bruce, who this is a much more recent one, who played Brigadier Bambera, like you really learn like not just of her experience as an actor, but what it's like growing up as a mixed race child in the 60s in an all white village because she was
Right.
adopted and all these things. And it's a fascinating life and a real glimpse into them. With Ian Martyr, it's very much the CV, but in a very good way. And I think it's a very, very good interview when it comes to those sort of things. I'm sure if
I
they did it tomorrow and he was still alive, they'd go for a different tact.
totally, totally. Yeah, and then the other one, of course, that we said we talk about is Jack Pitt for a very particular reason, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's all open to
Go on,
interpretation.
spill the beans.
Jack Pitt is not a name that many people know from Doctor Who, and certainly didn't know in the mid 90s when this was recorded. And he was Keith contacted him when he was doing a documentary called I Was a Doctor Who Monster, and he said, well, I'm not coming to London. But then Keith was heading down that way to interview Donald Tosh wherever he lived on the coast somewhere, and thought, oh, I'll pop in and get an interview for the William Hartnell tribute tape. And what you soon realise is that Jack Pitt is a very effeminate gay man, um, like much later in life. And there were all sorts of stories about William Hartnell not liking gay people. Like there's multiple accounts, and Bill's a man with a certain temper. And then it becomes apparent that these two not only were friends, but they shared digs. And while it's not said outright, there's certainly a very personal relationship, like closer than I've heard anybody else have with Bill. And allegations that Bill's wife hated him and all this
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. He says that, doesn't he?
Yeah, and so and there's even a telling of one of the stories from Adventure in Time and Space, which you see Bill and his wife experiencing, and it's not with Bill and his wife; it's with Bill and Jack Pitt. And
Right.
I sort of come away from it and go, I think those two men were in a relationship, and it suddenly, you know, makes you go, it kind of reassess everything about Hartnell and his craving for legitimacy, and his, he was that's what his whole acting career was about. I know we talk about that interview of him being a legitimate character actor,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
his granddaughter on another tape, another Mythmakers tape, talks all about that's what his life was about. Raised by his auntie, taken in by a rich benefacting elder male, and I'm not casting aspersions on anything untoward happening with that elder male or anything, but maybe there was a side of his life that he couldn't he didn't feel comfortable showing, and that was one of the many reasons that made him angry. And there are other people I've spoken to who get the same reading from it, and there's a couple of people who said they spoke to Jack Pitt and he confirmed they were in a relationship. That's only Jack Pitt's
Oh.
words on
Mm.
it. But um, and Keith walked away from the interview saying the same thing. He never says outright in there, I was in a relationship with William Hartnell, but it's certainly the closest relationship I've heard, like put to in an interview with William Hartnell, and it does strike me as a slightly odd one for a notorious homophobe.
Well, absolutely. I've got to say, I went to this thinking because my first experience of this was when it came up in the DVD range, and
Mm,
it would have been like 20, 20, 25 releases in when suddenly this turns up. And I think they'd already released the William Hartnell one by then, so we'd had a bit of Jack Pitt.
mm.
And I just remember seeing next time it's Jack Pitt on a disc with, I don't know, Louise Jameson or somebody. And I just remember thinking, why Jack Pitt?
Yeah.
And clearly that's obviously why. But so two things. One, I didn't get that out of,
What?
yeah, not really. I tell you what I got. And so this is not me saying this is what I think it is, but this was how it felt to me. Is like this is a guy who's in right at the foot of the industry,
Mm,
getting tiny walk-on parts, cameos, extra. Basically, is kind of an extra, really, or in a monster suit part of the time. Who then has a relationship, platonic relationship, shared digs because, for convenience relationship with the star of the show. And to me, it felt more like star of the show, extra. And so there's projection.
you're saying more like John Levine and John Pertwee.
Yes, I guess so. Not quite as, not quite as bizarre as John Levine,
I,
but this, that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
but I have to wonder why William Hartnell would hang out with him. You know?
Well, this is it. See, the thing about actors, so yes, and you're absolutely right. But also the thing about actors is they tend to spend a lot of the time when they're making films
Mm.
or when they're on the theatre on tour away from their family, such that their family,
Sleeping with each other.
well, yes, sometimes, not always, but such that being with their family becomes a treat rather than the norm, not something they take for granted. I wonder if, when Hartnell was doing Doctor Who, that was the first time in a long time that he'd spent a lot of time with his family, and maybe he was just finding it a bit of a struggle. As much as he probably loved his family, presumably, I'm not saying he didn't love his family, but I just wonder if that put him slightly out of his comfort zone, and maybe having somewhere where he could escape to with Jack Pitt was some kind of escape valve.
Maybe, maybe. I mean, they certainly enjoyed a drink or two together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that also would explain why Heather Hartnell, right, is not that keen on Jack Pitt, because she's probably thinking, all these years when I only get to see William for like 3 or 4 months a year, and now he's back in London, working in London. And what's he doing? He's off in some bloody flat with this extra, for crying out loud. So,
Shagging him.
well, maybe.
Look,
I'm saying
look, we'll
for
have to
me,
agree
it's
to
like,
disagree here, JR, but then I like a salacious story.
yes, totally. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not saying I think I'm right. I'm just saying that was the impression I got from watching it.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah, sure, JR.
but also it's a fascinating 45 minutes or whatever it is
Yeah.
with an interesting guy who actually, this is the weird thing of it. So Jack Peart plays, I don't know, monsters in about three Doctor Who stories, and he talks a lot about Doctor Who, but he's only actually in something like four stories or
But
something.
I think it was quite a big part of his life. You get
That's
this
it.
sometimes. If somebody has been a jobbing extra or a jobbing actor or whatever for 60 years, then 4 episodes of Doctor Who means nothing. If that's what you do and then you go on to do something else with your life that perhaps isn't as exciting, then you
Yeah.
look back on it more fondly as your big moment.
So they get, so for all that he didn't do a huge amount of Doctor Who, for the 45 minutes, I was thinking, oh, it'll be 5 minutes on the Doctor Who, 10 minutes on William Hartnell, and then 30 minutes about, I don't know, his second life down a coal pit or something. And instead, the entire 45 minutes basically is about him and Hartnell and
Yeah,
him and Doctor Who. So actually, from that perspective, it's quite fascinating
yeah,
too. Because although you can tell there are moments when his memory's not quite putting the pieces together exactly as they were,
mm,
but you do actually get quite a bit of detail about what making
yeah,
television was like. Up until Mark Gatiss does an adventure in space and time, this is as much as you're ever going to know about watching
yeah.
how Doctor Who was made in the 1960s.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I also think he misunderstands the meaning of the word stoned because he keeps talking about them being stoned, and presumably he means drunk. Unless that's the real revelation. If William
I think
Hartnell,
you misunderstand, Dylan, because up until a certain point in the 1970s, stoned did mean drunk,
I've
and the meaning
never
of
heard that.
the word has changed over the years.
Ah, well, there we go. Well, shoot me down.
I'm pretty sure I've definitely read old things where authors are talking about being stoned, and it's clear they're talking
I
about
suppose
drunk.
stone drunk was a saying, wasn't it?
Probably, and that's probably where it came from. And then when they needed an expression, well, probably people just started using the same expressions to talk about being stoned on drugs, and then it
Yeah,
just gradually became just the one thing rather than the other.
yeah, makes sense.
Are there any other of the myth makers? So we've just watched these two
Yeah.
for this, and I've not had time to dig into any more, although I suspect I might go back and watch a few now. But are there any others for you that stand out as particularly interesting
I
ones?
mean, depending on your like what eras and what aspects of the show you are interested in, you
Yeah,
will find something for like something that piques your interest. But they're all wonderful. The William Hartnell tribute tape and Patrick Troughton tribute tape are both great. Wonderful chat with Jacqueline Pierce. They've done 4 volumes on Doctor Who magazine, which are all great and just like a real look at the evolution of the magazine.
yeah,
There's some archive interviews with Douglas Camfield, Graham Williams, um, and then sort of over the more recent years, as they were trying to complete their Doctors sets, the DVDs that were on the high street, you get a real like they start to fill in some of the gaps, and you get people like Glenn McCoy, Ben Aronovich, Ian Briggs, Kate Eastall, who was JNT's
yeah.
secretary, who all deliver fantastic stuff. And then they've got loads of we've talked about the dramas a little bit, but they've got loads of fantastic documentaries covering the history of the show, be it something like Where on Earth is Katie Manning, which is a lot of fun, although there's some poignant moments, to following people going on the Doctor Who cruise, or Patrick Troughton in America, which has got a ton of interviews with Patrick Troughton that you've just never seen before.
That was my favorite of all the releases. Because when I was on the subscription, you'd occasionally get a flyer or something saying, why not buy this as well? And I'm like, yeah, I'm having that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's brilliant just to see. Again, I don't think you get to know who Patrick Troughton is because he was a very private person. And but there's what a convention panel,
I think
sort of
there's two interviews on there,
yeah,
two short interviews from American TV, intercut with stuff off
fan
the panel
yeah.
or whatever. Yeah.
Then there's like PBS stuff and interviews with fans who
Mm.
met him there. It's also interesting to see how like he responds to the same like about, say, over three different interviews, they ask him what his favorite story is, and he says a different one every time. And it's just the one he can remember that day. It's Evil of the Daleks one day, it's Space Pirates the next. And I just think,
Excellent.
he's messing with the historians there.
Yeah, yeah. Or maybe not. We'll
But yeah,
find out when those episodes come back, right?
yeah, well, absolutely.
All right, time is upon us. We've not got long left. So I need to ask you, Dylan, and you've told this story, but how did this book come about?
It happened during lockdown. Keith Barnfather started posting things on his Facebook wall, just little memories of different myth makers, different dramas. And I'd written about the dramas before, which is how I first met Keith with my downtime book. And I said to him, "No, you should write a book." He goes, "I haven't got time to write a book." And he said, "Well, you should write the book." And I said, "I haven't got time to write a book." And then I went downstairs, told my brother about it, and 2 hours later, we were still talking about myth makers in real time. And he was like, "You are the only person that can write this book." And so we went from there. And then
And you are
Keith,
the only person who has written this book.
it's true. And then Keith put me in touch with David Howe, who I'd interviewed before, but he was like, "Yeah, that sounds right up our street." And then it took about 5 years because life got in the way. But I was ploughing at it at various different points for a long time. I interviewed Keith countless times, so it's really, it's the story of all these releases, but it's about fans cutting their teeth on these productions, and it's also the interaction and the memories of Doctor Who fans with the stars of the show and how those sort of interweave and become friendships or not in some cases.
Well, you know what it is, don't you? Because there's no other fandom quite like the Doctor Who fandom.
Mm,
I mean, Star Wars has a huge fandom, Star Trek has a huge fandom, all sorts of other things have huge fandoms as well now, Harry Potter, I guess.
mm,
But the Doctor Who fandom is very specific to Doctor Who.
yeah,
It's not like those other fandoms in many, many ways. And these books, Downtime, Myths and Legends, they're not just the story of, when Nicholas Briggs rocked up to Tom Baker's house to spend 45 minutes talking to him in his living room. They are the story of how that fandom evolved into being,
yeah,
really,
yeah.
in many ways.
No, I think so. And there's a couple of other things that I've contemplated writing that's very much of that sort of similar subject matter. I don't, it won't cover the real time output again, but like I think that's what I'm probably interested in documenting is the history of fandom because the show's sort of been done to death.
But you've got to do the history of Doctor Who podcasting next, because that's the only way I'm going to end up in one of your books. So it better happen.
You never know. The strangers in space are thanked in the front of it.
Are we?
Yeah.
Oh no. I'm definitely glad I got it now. Am I named? Am I name checked?
Unfortunately not.
Bastard.
It's the
Right.
whole contingent.
Excellent. Right, Dylan, we score things on this podcast, and I'm painfully aware that we didn't score the Ian Marter one or the Jack Pitt one when we were talking about it. So instead, I'm going to ask you to score the book, Myths and Legends, the real-time picture story by Dylan Reese.
It's 8 out of 10 for me.
Excellent. Right, until we do this again, I was JR,
I was Dylan.
and we will speak again soon.